So I wanted to talk about cosmetics, toiletries, whatever you want to call them, tonight. Particularly what gets us very confused is, I would say, books like this that I'm not going to put on camera. But there's certain books that are out there that give a very specific list of what you can and cannot get. The truth is the books get a very bad rap, this particular book. He actually has a guide at the end where he points out, I'm giving you a list of products that are totally fine, that we've investigated, we can tell you are fine. But also, this is not an exclusive list. If you want to look at various products, you want to take them, just look at the ingredients. If you don't see X, Y, Z, a number of different ingredients that he lists off, that's also fine to get. And so people view this as very oppressive, very strict. It might be taking certain chumros that we wouldn't necessarily follow. We're going to get into those details. But the books are actually, in addition to giving you certain products that they tell you are for sure fine, they also tell you, by the way, you can also check a number of things out for yourself as well. I was speaking to Murray Shore of Murray Shore Pharmacy this past week, and he gave me guidelines also of medications that you could eyeball. You don't need to look at the COR guide necessarily. The ones that they're telling you are for sure okay. But then there's also ones that you can check the ingredients yourself, and you can keep an eye out for certain things, and then if you don't see them, you know you're in the clear. But anyways, just talking about where these books are coming from, right? What's their perspective? Because it gets very complicated once you're dealing with something that's not entirely chametz, sort of chametz, kind of, it went bad. What's the deal? So, first, let's just make it clear, books like this also are coming from a perspective of taking chametz, that isur, very, very seriously, perhaps more so than other isurim in the Torah, and that's coming with good precedent, because the Torah actually has a number of different isurim that it lists off with regards to chametz. I can give you a short grocery list here from Rambam Sefer HaMitzvos. So he says there's, first of all, a positive commandment. He says, this is not on your source sheet, this is not mine. That on the first day of Pesach, make sure that you've eliminated all chametz from your house. That's one positive commandment, get rid of chametz. All the rest are lavin, they're all negatives. So in terms of lavin, or negative commandments, we have, you're not allowed to eat or derive benefit from chametz. That comes from the lo ye'achel chametz, you shall not eat chametz. You can't eat mixtures that contain chametz. That's from kol machmetzas lo sechelu. Anything that contains chametz within it, you shall not eat. You can't eat chametz separate, independent mitzvah. This is according to the Rambam, not according to the Ramban. Is that you can't eat chametz after chatzos of day 14 until Pesach actually begins. So that's a separate issur that the Rambam thinks. The Rambam disagrees, fine. There is an issur of seeing chametz that is owned and controlled by you. That's lo yera elecha chametz. Right? It shall not be seen in your possession. And then there is a separate issur of owning chametz, no matter where it is, even if you don't see it. That's shivas yamim seor lo yimatzeh bevatechem. That for 7 days you shall not see any type of leavening agent or chametz in your house. Anyways, in total now we have 6 mitzvahs that pertain to chametz. Some of them are very serious. It should also be noted, eating chametz would yield the penalty of kares. What exactly that means, there's different opinions, but everyone is in agreement that it's very severe. It could mean death before childbirth. It could be a person spiritually cut off from God in the next world. Serious stuff. So when you have all of these different isurim in the Torah, that kind of gives a push to the rabbis to say this might be a good opportunity and area of Jewish law to develop more Isurei Derabanan, perhaps to develop more of a machmir view concerning chametz than with regards to other things. That's similarly with regards to I think a Nazir. The Nazir has tons of Isurim that he has, and then the rabbis actually use that in some ways as a blueprint for how to actually determine Dinei Derabanan, where they should make rabbinical ordinances. Similarly here, you have all these Isurim that gives us an indication that chametz should be treated very seriously. Okay, so we have chumras with chametz, but at the same time, there is a limit. It only goes so far. So just out of curiosity, what do people do with regards to their house cleaning before Pesach? With your bathroom products, do you go through a list? Do you pay attention to these things?
We remove things that we know contain, like there are obviously some things, there are some wheat-based products and like that. But otherwise, no.
You're eyeballing ingredients of all the things you have in the house.
Mouthwash and toothpaste, that's it.
Okay, things that you actually put in your mouth. Maybe we'll treat those more seriously.
I look at the shampoo and the deodorant, as well as the mouthwash and toothpaste.
So you're also eyeballing ingredients, or are you looking at a list?
No, Deodorant for sure I changed. As I told you, the one I've got has barley extract in it.
Okay.
I'm sure. And the shampoo I think does too, so I just use something else. And then the mouthwash and the toothpaste, and that's it. And nothing else. I don't use anything else.
Okay.
Other than medication.
So it sounds like we're all, in this to some degree. We understand that there are issues, that there are concerns. So that's good. Now, I wanted to go through the basics of where these Yisurim actually come from. So the first source we have is Gemara Pesach, and these are just very short makaros that we have to all work out together. That's really the main thing. The next three makaros are like a puzzle. So the first one says, Amar Rava, Charcho Kodem Zmano. It's the Gemara Pesach in Chaf Aleph Amud Beis. Rava says that if you have bread, chametz, really like a nice loaf of bread, but it got totally burned, not like just slightly toasted, but really burned entirely before Pesach starts, mutter b'hana, that is permitted to derive benefit from. Notice the word hana and not achila. Okay, that might be relevant later. Afilu la'achar zmano, and you can get benefit from that burned to a crisp bread even when Pesach's already begun, even after the time that Pesach has kicked in. A general rule is that whatever status chametz had coming into Pesach, that's what it retains, irrespective of what actually happens to it. That's why chametz on Pesach won't be batel in a mixture, whereas before Pesach begins, if it's already cooked and mixed into other stuff, then it can be batel. So there is some importance to, let's say, certain things being done before Pesach to really give yourself an additional layer of protection. But anyways, burnt chametz is no longer chametz, so it's okay. You can get benefit from it. Then you have the next Gemara in Pesach and Hey Amud Beis. So it says, Tanya, we learned in a brisa, hapas she'ifsha. If you have bread that has become moldy, chai levayer, you still have to destroy that, right? Sounds very different from saying that it's permitted for benefit. You have to destroy it. Because it is possible, it's fit to be ground up, and then it can be used to cause many other doughs to leaven. In the yeast that we use nowadays, when we talk about sa'or in the Torah, you shouldn't have any sa'or in your home, any leaven. So that's not the yeast that we usually use nowadays. The yeast that we have is biological yeast, right? It's a culture. It's a fungus. It's not something that actually is chametz at all. Don't add it to bread. Don't add it to dough, because then your dough will become chametz. But that actual yeast, that's not what we're talking about.
It's like starter dough. You make these stuff.
Right. Well, sourdough they call it, right?
Yes.
Right, that it's really nasty stuff on its own, but it's incredibly fermented to the point that if you throw it into another dough, it aids in the fermenting process. So that's what the Torah is talking about. And now this Gemara is saying that if you're dealing with moldy bread, even though you would never eat it, it's disgusting, it's moldy, since it can make other things chametz, it's like chametz concentrated in and of itself, you gotta burn it. Okay. Now we have a Mishnah. I'm not even going to go through all of these things because I'm not really, a lot of them I can't tell you what the identity of them are. But the general theme is that we're dealing with a lot of non-food products, right? Some of them are food products, but a lot of them are, let's say, a paste that scribes use, the Zuman Shel Tzava'im, right? There's a number of, so to speak, household products that the Mishnah is telling me, and all of these things, Rabbi, these are Elu, this group of things, Ovrin Ba Pesach. They need to be removed on Pesach. There's something wrong with them. And we have to figure out why something is wrong with them. I don't eat these things. You're not allowed to own chametz either. So maybe that's going to be where the issue is. But what exactly is, some would translate Elu Ovrin, these are the things that you violate Pesach with. Don't have them. So the question is, what is the violation? Okay. But the Mishnah just ends that Hare Elu Ba'azhara, these are all, they're subject to a warning, as Sansino translates, they are what we would call an Isser Lav, a negative commandment. Be'in behem mishum kares, but they wouldn't actually have the full-fledged Isser Chametz on them. So again, are we talking about just holding on to them? We're talking about eating them? Not so clear at first glance. We'll have to work out all of these pieces of the puzzle. It sounds like there's something which I'm allowed to eat, there's something which I must destroy, and then another group of things, like household items, which we're not sure what exactly the problem is, but there is a problem. Okay. So from there we'll go to the Trumas Hadeshin. The Trumas Hadeshin kind of distills a number of different commentaries, and he does it with regards to a question that was asked of him. He says, if I have an ink, one of the ingredients in it is barley beer, right? So that's certainly chametz. And also there's these various dyes that contribute to the ink, ground up pieces of goldnut, vitriol, I think vitriol is the English word for it, right? Okay, that's the word, that's what they called it. So am I allowed to use this ink for writing on Pesach or not? Why would I think that I can't? Benefit from chametz, right? I'm not eating it for sure, although we'll see, we'll talk about that in a minute. So an answer is, Truva the Trumas Hadeshin says, Yira de Shari Lichtovo. I think it seems that it's fine to write with it. My proof would be like what Rava says, the first source that we had. The Amar Rava said, if it gets totally burnt to a crisp prior to Pesach, you can enjoy benefit from it. Even after the time, even after Pesach's already kicked in with all of its various laws. The Ashire, another commentary, he says that's provided that it gets, and the terminology that we're familiar with, it becomes inedible to a dog, as long as that's the case, and that probably is with regards to an ink. And then it has to be like extremely moldy bread. So now he just combined those two categories. That might not be what everybody agrees with, but right now he combined the burnt bread and the moldy bread. Even though the moldy bread, our second source said you have to get rid of. Right? Okay. Others want to say, some want to say that even if you, I don't know why you'd want to, but if you were to eat such ink, it would be permitted. The afra ba'almahu, because once something is so incredibly messed up that even a dog wouldn't eat it, it's viewed as dust of the earth. It's viewed as something which is totally lost its identity as chametz. But I, the Trumas Hadeshin, do not think that's correct. Even though it's true, this guy's crazy for eating ink, and his mindset should be subsumed within the rest of the world, right? And therefore this is dirt to the rest of the world, it's dirt to him too. Whoever, since he himself is eating it, is forbidden. And that's what others say as well. Once you're eating it, there's a principle that you might be familiar with also called achshave. Have you heard of that term? It's I am considering it important. Right?
Well, because he's eating it.
Right. It might be
important because one's eating it must be important.
Right. That there's a prohibition, and so food, if it's lost its status as chametz, let's say in this case, it turns into afra ba'alma, dust of the earth. At the same time, many poskim, the Trumas Hadeshin included, will say, but if you are going to eat it and you attribute importance to it, so it's true, it's dust of the earth, and we're not changing the biblical reality of what the Torah's perspective is on that. You're not eating chametz, you're eating dirt. But the rabbi said that if you attribute importance to it, we're going to treat it as if you are turning it into a food product again, and therefore it's going to be a problem for you. Okay, now that's being done by deciding to eat this stuff. Okay, the Rambam seems to be alluding to this as well. He doesn't say it explicitly. If you have something that chametz is mixed into, even if it's not edible, this mixture by man at all, hatriak. Anybody know what hatriak is? It's a famous medicine that the Greeks were using, theriac. You ever hear of theriac? We had a sheer theater, as they call it. We acted something out between Galen and Maimonides a number of months ago, and theriac was one of the things that Galen was very into as one of his medicines. So the Rambam had it also. So if you have this theriac, it's a disgusting, horrible thing. It's not really edible, but it's a medicine. And you have other things like that. You can hold on to it. You can keep it in your house. But however, you cannot eat it until after Pesach's over. Even if there's just the tiniest amount of chametz in it, and the chametz is really disgusting at this point, you can't eat the let's say the ink in this case that we're talking about, but you can keep it in the house.
Keep it, right, so that's the point. You keep it in the house, just can't eat it.
Right. There are things that straddle the line, that I can't eat it, but it's not, and that makes sense with regards to this product. Why? Because like what we said earlier, this isn't really chametz, right? The only problem is of achshave, that if a person eats it, he's attributed importance to it. He's made it into a food product, right? So on its own, it's not a food product. So I could leave that in my house. that's not a problem. Okay. What do I have to? Venira, right? Venira did the yo hamavushal b'samamanam dilael. And it seems that if you're dealing with the ink that has been cooked in these various dyes, like we mentioned, shehin marum yoser merosh velana, they're very bitter. They're more disgusting than gall and wormwood. Vaday nifsa mishtias kelev kodem haPesach. A dog certainly not going to eat this, and it came into that state before Pesach. V'havei kecharcho kodem zmano. Therefore, it's like the bread that has been totally burnt to a crisp before Pesach. The mutter ba'ana la'achar zmano, and you can enjoy benefit from that. He then goes on. I don't have this in the source sheet, but he talks about, well, what happens though? Because with ink or with a pen, I think specifically with quills back then, even more so than what we do now, although some people I think still have this habit, is they'll lick a pen, right? So then he gets into, well, do I have to be worried about that? I said you can't eat this stuff, right? But the Trumas Hadeshin said, why am I telling you can't eat this stuff?
Because usually people use the quill and put it in their mouth.
They put it in their mouth, but why did the Trumas Hadeshin have a problem with somebody eating such ink?
It's important for you, but are you doing that as a habit?
Right.
It's a habit to not to eat it.
If a person declares, I'm going to eat this, it's important.
Right.
But if it's just a habitual, I'm licking my pen, that's not achshave, that's not a problem, so it's going to be okay. So that's where the Trumas Hadeshin is coming from. If you were to take the approach that he represents the Rambam and the Rosh as well. So if I was to go back to these three sources that we mentioned earlier, what you have is, you have bread that is entirely burnt to a crisp. That's permitted for benefit. It's not permitted for eating. That might be why the Gemara chose that word. It said it's only mutter b'hana. It's permitted for benefit and not for eating, perhaps because of this concern of achshave. I attribute importance to it. Okay. Then I have other items. I have, let's skip to the Mishnah right now. I have these household products, some of them which contain chametz in them, right? It's saying that you would be over something if you did something with these items. So the Trumas Hadeshin would say, what is that referring to? If you were to take these items and eat them, right? Like the Mishnah says, there's no kares here, right? Because this isn't really, this shouldn't be Nisa d'Oraisa either, although it might be. And then the second category, the second source that we mentioned, he didn't really get into this, although we mentioned that he included pascha ifsha, the moldy bread, together with the bread that was burnt to a crisp. So really, the Mefarshim discussed that there's bread that's really moldy, disgusting, not fit for a dog, just like this ink. That's going to be entirely okay. Whereas the source that we saw about the bread that got moldy, that's where it's still edible to a dog, just not to a human, right? You don't have to worry about yourself eating it, as the Gemara says. What's your concern? Your only concern is that if this gets mixed in with any other things, it's going to start creating a chametzik mess. So that's why you have to get rid of it. So those are your gradations. Okay. Now, just this concept of achshave, because you don't really see it invoked explicitly in the Gemara, and that's why some might be more uneasy about invoking it. It does come up in non-Pesach and non-kashrus discussions. The next source is the Gemara in Shavuos, where Amar Rava says, Shavua shelo ochel, if a guy makes an oath that he says, I'm not going to eat, right? I guess, let's say for a certain amount of time, that he's capable of doing that. So va'achal afar, and then he was to eat dirt. So what would happen? Pater. He's exempt, but pater is a very important word in the Gemara. When we say pater, do we mean it's totally fine?
No, it's pater below mutar.
Right. Pater aval aser is which means rabbinically forbidden. So this shows, first of all, that the concept of achshave should be viewed as rabbinic in nature, right? If I attribute importance to this, the rabbis are the ones that are telling me that I'm infusing it with a food identity, right? And that's why this person is only, from the Torah's perspective, he has not violated his oath. He's not viewed as having eaten anything by eating this dirt. But the rabbi said, if you're eating dirt, you're showing some importance to that act of eating, you're treating it as a food, and therefore, midirabanan, we have a problem with you doing this in light of your oath. Okay, so that's where you see this concept. When you're dealing with the bread that got totally burnt to a crisp, like we mentioned, the Trumas Hadeshin thinks there's achshave, and you can't eat it. You can benefit from it, but you can't eat it. Not everyone agrees with that. You have the Ran, the next source. He disagrees with this, at least applying this concept of achshave here. He says, Charcho kodem zmano, muter b'hanaso achar zmano. Right? He's quoting the Gemara that talked about the bread being burnt to a crisp. The Gemara says you can get benefit from it. Perish. An explanation is, Kagon shecharcho ad she'in hakelav yakol la'ochlo. That is, when it gets burnt to the extent extent that even a dog wouldn't eat it. The ilav hachi, if that's not the case, amrinan beperek ilu ovrin, we say in the other Gemara, in our second source that we had earlier, hapasha ifsha, if you have bread that gets moldy, v'nifsala mileh chola adam, it is not something that is fit to be eaten by a person, but not a dog. Kivin sheru'uya le'chola kelev, since it's still fit to eat for a dog, it requires being destroyed. Now here's the big thing. When the Gemara says that bread burnt to a crisp is permitted to be, you can for deriving benefit from, that's also really, you could actually eat this stuff too. Since it totally lost its status as bread before Pesach kicked in, it lost its status as chametz. You can eat it. It's like dirt. You can eat dirt on Pesach. You can eat burnt to a crisp bread also. But because people don't generally eat bread, nakat lishna de mutter b'hanasa. Right? I would ask the Ran, why does the Gemara use the language of it's mutter for benefit? Because listen, nobody's going to eat this. You could eat it if you wanted to, but the Gemara is talking about what's regular, what's normal. Because even if you were to eat it, and this is also a key statement, if you were to eat it, I would not even view that as an act of eating. Rather just that you're getting some strange benefit from it. And again, that's only when the bread was burnt before Pesach begins. However, it won't lose its status if it only gets burnt coming into after Pesach already began. It would have to be totally eliminated. Okay. So, in any event, if I take the Ran's approach, chametz that is inedible, is there any concern here whatsoever? Totally fine. Right? I don't have to, and presumably, right? I'm thinking our shampoos, our soaps, or whatever, are inedible, right?
Right.
A dog to a dog, not just us, to a dog. So it really should be fine. If I'm approaching things like the Trumas Hadeshin, what would I say about all these various products?
Don't eat them.
Don't eat them, but using them is totally fine. So maybe I would have to be concerned about, I don't know, mouthwash, about toothpaste and things like that go into my mouth. Even then, there'd be what to talk about, because I'm not trying to eat this stuff, right? What's the kind of, like we mentioned earlier with the pen, right? Achshave is not happening when I habitually lick my pen, right? Because this is not an act of eating. You call this eating? That's not what I'm trying to do. It's a habit. Now, I am putting toothpaste and mouthwash in my mouth on purpose, but by no means do I intend to consume any of this. If it all goes out, I'm happy, right? Okay, some residue ends up in my mouth and probably ends up in my stomach at some point, but that's not what I'm trying to do. So if something is inedible, it should be fine. It should really, across the board, it shouldn't be a problem. So let's talk about things that I actually intend to consume now. Okay. If I'm dealing with medicine, right, a pill, could that be different? Right, so why?
Different. You're intending to swallow it.
I'm intending to swallow it. Now, why would you say, though, maybe it should be thrown into the same category of things I don't have to worry about?
It's not really food. It's not really edible.
It's changed a little bit in the formulation. I mean, it's still common.
Changing might be a factor also. Right. I'm making a big assumption, by the way, when I'm dealing with pills, which might not be true, is that the item is viewed as inedible. Okay? Sometimes with pills that's the case, but certainly if you're dealing with a liquid medicine, you're dealing with certain, let's say coatings of a pill.
There's also chewable medications, right?
Sorry?
There's some medications that are chewable.
Right, chewables, those are specifically, they make sure that has a good taste, because otherwise no one's going to chew it.
An Isser Achila of eating. So what's eating? Eating chametz. So eating medicine, is that Achila? I mean, swallowing medicine.
And again, it's important to point out, it's not that I can't eat this, it is that I can't eat this, but it's not a food. It's only a food if I attribute enough importance to it that I view it as a food.
Right, so I mean, from my standpoint, I don't view medication as a food.
Right, we don't make brachos on it. We don't typically treat it as food. Right? We don't view it in that way at all. So the Shagas Aryeh, I don't have him on your sources here, but he's the one that famously causes all the issues. He thinks medicines would be considered within the realm of Achshave. You're attributing importance to this chametz stick or whatever. Really, this applies to all other isurim in the Torah as well. You are applying giving it a degree of importance that makes it considered important in your eyes, and therefore it's considered a consumption of a food product. Again, only from a rabbinic perspective. From the Torah's perspective, this is done. It's inedible. It's like dirt. dirt. But from the rabbi's perspective, the Shagas Aryeh thinks this is an issue. The Ksav Sofer, this is source Zion on your source sheet, he's thinking along the lines that we are. Yesh Lomar, some say, some say that even if I consume it and I don't do it in the normal way of benefiting from this product, I don't eat it in a normal way, right? I'm even, that's another thing we haven't talked about. I'm swallowing the pill. I don't even chew it. I don't employ the same activity that I do with food. But he says, Mishum Akshave. Some say that it's a problem because they're attributing importance to it. Hagami Daraisa Batela. So, true, from the Torah's perspective, it's done for already. But Daito Haim Asu. But their mindset, when they consume this, makes it forbidden. Mishum Akshave. Because they attribute importance to it. But all of this, the Ksav Sofer says, this is only if a person's intention is for benefit in the same way you benefit from food when you eat it, for enjoyment, to satiate your hunger. But if you're doing it for the purposes of healing, and you're actually choosing, let's say, something that doesn't taste very good, and if anything, you see it as the lesser of two evils, right? You don't want to eat this either. There was there was a medicine in Britain once that they had an ad campaign of just people like grimacing in the commercial and said, "Tastes so bad, you know it's working." Right? So along the same lines, you don't want to eat this. You're doing it because it's the lesser of two evils. So I don't view that as eating something, as a person thinking about something which is not typically enjoyed. As a person transforming this pill all of a sudden into an enjoyment kind of item. He's not doing that. It's just for healing. And since there's no importance attributed to it, this thing is, again, it reverts back to being just like dirt. There's no prohibition at all. The rabbis had a problem when you attributed importance. You're not doing that here. And concerning something that you wouldn't attribute importance to, we wouldn't allow that for somebody who's sick and is not in danger. But here, but here I'm dealing with where there's no prohibition at all. It doesn't matter what degree of sickness you have, according to the Ksav Sofer, you can have this pill. Again, this is all under the assumption that what I'm dealing with is something that doesn't taste good. Right? I'm dealing with your typical swallowable pill. Okay. That's not the case in all situations. And if that's not, we may have to draw upon more heterim. Okay, but right now it sounds like a mainstream approach would be saying that if I'm dealing with something that tastes bad, it's nifsal, it's like dirt, and there's really nothing to worry about. No book necessary. Right? Even if it can have chametz ingredients in it, and I know for sure there's chametz ingredients in it, but it just doesn't taste good. So end of story. It's something that even a dog wouldn't eat. That's also important. It's not just that I don't like the taste. It has to be something really bad. Okay.
Or a chewable orange tablet that tastes good might be a little different. Liquid medications also you could have a concern with. And this is really what we're talking about right now. In many ways applies to the whole year. Right? We're talking about chametz. But you very often have, so speaking to Mr. Shore, I told you have glycerin put in many children's cough syrups to make it taste good. Glycerin is very often derived from animals. You have gelatin that's used for gel caps. Gelatin itself is a complicated topic because it might have changed to the point where we don't view it as prohibited, but common practice is that we view it as, if it's animal derived, as problematic, right? That's why when you get gummies in Israel, specifically, well, now they're here too, but they're, back in the day it used to be, you could only get these things in Israel. They use fish gelatin. They use the ground up bones, that's what gelatin is, by the way, ground up bones of fish that don't require shechita. So therefore, there's no issues, there's no problems of kashrus. But if you were to take bones of, not even a pig, which sometimes they do, but bones from a kosher, in theory, animal, but that animal is probably not getting a shechita, and therefore it's, I shouldn't do that, by the way, I'm not supposed to do that, so that gelatin would be non-kosher if you assume that it didn't go through, substantial change that changed its status. But okay, so Shulchan Aruch paskins this idea, it sounds like Shulchan Aruch paskins this idea of the Ksav Sofer, because they say sheret sarif, if you have a creature, a non-kosher creature that is totally burnt to a crisp, so mutter la'achlo mishum refuah, your witch doctor prescribes this for you, so you're allowed to eat this for healing purposes. The afro ba'amahu, it's just dust, and apparently
eating it for refuah purposes is not viewed as giving it any importance. That's fine. Medicine's okay. So it sounds like mainstream halakha at this point would say that these things are fine if I'm dealing again with something not edible. One more factor the Chazon Ish brings is, and this might be relevant to actually things that might taste good, that are viewed as edible. Chazon Ish says, what it sounds like from the later authorities, like the Shagas Aryeh, like we mentioned, that you shouldn't eat this lechatchila. There's achshave problems. Even if this chametz became inedible to a dog, right? Still, I'll tell you, mikol makom ayedei ta'arovos shar dvarim. If other things are mixed in, the ein daito ala chametz, and your mind is not on the chametz aspect of this medicine, mutter, then it's fine. The lo shayak kan achshave. There's no importance attributed to these things. The daito ala samim. Your mindset is on the medicine, on the medicinal product. The starches, let's say, that are in a pill, those are meant as a binder. Those aren't meant to actually provide the medicinal benefit. So the Chazon Ish claims, even according to the approach that views achshave as a problem, that having a medicine or having chametz in medicine form would be attributing importance to it. He says that's only if it's pure chametz. It doesn't really exist. You have chametz that's mixed in with other things, so also it's not a problem. All of these things, all of these elements are elements that the machmirim are going to disagree with. But it sounds like you've got a nice, steady amount of makoros that seem to think that this is okay. Now the Achiezer, he brings up a... is that the next source for you guys? The Achiezer, Yad Aleph?
That was good.
Yeah? Source good. Oh, I skipped this one, right. Yes, and that's important. That's why I was a little confused. This Gemara is important also. The Gemara says this is actually Hilchos HaSeder, not super relevant to us except for the last part. It says, Amar Rava, Bala Matzah, if a person just swallows matzah whole, without actually, he compounds it into like a powdery mix, he doesn't do any chewing, just gulps it all down. So yatsa, he's fulfilled his obligation for matzah, provided he had a kazayas. Bala maror, but if he does the same thing with ground up maror, with lettuce, let's say, lo yatsa, not the case. The Mefarshim explain, because matzah, what am I trying to do? I'm trying to eat it. That's all I'm going for. By maror, I need to taste some bitterness. An act of swallowing is going to preclude me from being able to taste anything, so that doesn't work. Now, bala matzah amar yedei matzah, where am I up to? Lo yatsa. Bala matzah umaror. If you swallowed both of those things together, yedei matzah yatsa, matzah you fulfilled, yedei maror lo yatsa. Maror, again, you didn't fulfill, really just applying the same principles and showing, even when they're all combined, that's the case. Krachan besiv, let's say I wrap these food items in some kind of, fiber, right? Like a kind of like a capsule kind of thing. Uvla, and then you swallow that. Af yedei matzah, nami lo yatsa. Even matzah, which we said we're only worried about eating, you didn't fulfill. Apparently there has to be some kind of contact of my throat, my palate, to the food at least. Even if I'm not going to taste it, I at least have to let it touch my, my inner body. Now, can that help us here?
So, once swallowing something that's encapsulated fiber and it's going into the stomach without touching the palate.
Yeah.
So maybe there's something there to help us.
Even if the let's say the pill is chametz, but it has a capsule around it, which many do, right? That has no problems to it at all. Then I should also be fine, right? And say very often the capsule is the actual problematic element of a pill. You have the gel caps and things like that.
The capsule's okay, but there's something inside.
But even if the capsule's okay, some would suggest make a capsule around that capsule, so to speak. Rosh Shlomo Zalman Auerbach says in certain situations, take like a thin tissue paper, wrap it around the pill. You ever heard of doing something like this? On Yom Kippur, some advise it also, wrap some tissue paper around it and then swallow the pill. It's much more unpleasant, but then you've gotten yourself out of all issues, perhaps.
Maybe choking on it too.
Yeah. Then you have to worry about water also. We're not going to get into that today. But the Achiezer says, even according to the Shagas Aryeh opinion, we're worried about achshave. We think that this is a problem. If you wrap it up in something, you should be fine. Same idea. I'm not going to do this inside. But he said, I'm going to use that Gemara to Lakula as well.
not just to show that I can't be yotzei matzah this way, but also that I can't be over an isser of eating, let's say, chametz, or at least attributing importance to such chametz by doing it in this fashion, right? It might be that you would still be, I wouldn't say, you could eat pork, as long as you wrap some tissue paper around it. But what he's saying is, achshaveh I've certainly gotten out of, right? I'm no longer, I'm kind of attributing anti-importance to this thing, right? I'm showing very clearly I am not trying to eat this item. I'm just trying to get it in my body in one way. This happens to be the way to do it. So that's another approach that could help you out significantly. Okay. Now, the next couple of sources kind of take us to a point where actually now the Chomer might actually start to make a little bit more sense. Because everything I've told you right now made a big assumption. That how does this pill in question, how does it become inedible? There's all this other stuff in it. Right? There's all this medicinal items, and altogether this is not an appetizing thing. The dog's not going to eat this pill. Right? That's how most poskim view it. I look at the entirety of this item. The entirety of this item is nifsal. It's disgusting. So therefore, I have various heterim. The only thing I have to worry about is achshaveh. Right? But that might not be the case. And we could go through the lumdus of it also. So we have a couple of sources here that are important. In source Yud Beis, you have a Gemara in Avodah Zarah, Samach Zayin Amud Beis. It says, "Lo sofu kol nevela lager asher b'sharecha." Right? Don't eat nevela. Don't eat the carcass of an animal that was not shechted. Right? Instead, give it to the Gentile that lives in your midst, the non-Jew. You can give it to him. He can eat it. That's fine. Non-Jews don't have to keep kosher. So great. Now the Gemara derives from that pasuk is kol ha'ru'uya lager karuya nevela. Anything. We're not just going to use it as a solution. What do I do when I have nevela? I'm also going to use it as helping me define what nevela is. Anything which is fit for a ger to eat, that is something that's called nevela. She'ein ru'uya lager ina karuya nevela. But if it's not fit for a ger, it's something that's so spoiled and nasty and disgusting that it's not fit for a ger. He would never eat this. Let's say, so then I'm not going to call that nevela. What am I going to call that? Probably something more like afra ba'alma. It's dust of the earth. It's not considered a forbidden product at all anymore. Okay? So that's one source. It's very important, and we generalize that source to almost every other Isser Achila that exists in the Torah. If something gets so bad that it's inedible, that's kind of the backdrop of everything we've been talking about so far. I didn't even substantiate that source. How do we know if something becomes inedible, it ceases to have the identity of the food product that it once was? That's because of this source. So that's key. The next source says, this is kind of an inference of an idea without actually stating it outright. But the Gemara in Pesachim says, Amar Abaye says, Hakol modim b'kilai hakerem. Everybody agrees that with regards to admixtures that involve grapes, that's a forbidden product, shaloken alein, you will get malchus, you will be considered in violation of the biblical commandment. Afilu shalok kederach hanasan, even if you consume this in the in an abnormal way, in a way that's not typically done for getting benefit from this item. And I don't think, I have it in the English, I don't have it in the Hebrew, I didn't finish off the source. But it says that the Gemara continues, my taima, because the word achila is not written with regards to kilai hakerem. It says kilai hakerem is forbidden, and it doesn't elaborate how. Other products, other isurim in the Torah, are described as, I can't eat these things. But if I consume it in a way that I wouldn't qualify as eating, I wouldn't define it as an act of eating, it's fine. So it sounds like we have an additional head there. Let's say something is not kosher for whatever reason, and the Torah defines it, tells me with regards to this product, do not eat it, so don't eat it. So if I consume it in a non-eating way, in an abnormal way, that's also permitted. Now the Chavos Das, the next source, we're not going to do this inside. It gets a little complicated, but he says, what do I need both of these sources for? If a food is inedible, right? By definition, any act of trying to eat that is going to be considered irregular, right? And if I'm dealing with, if you give me just the irregular eating heter, I don't need the inedible heter at all. That's what it sounds like at first glance, right? It sounds like they both accomplish the same goal. What do I need both for? So he says, and this is an approach that, like I mentioned earlier, most people would tell you this pill is entirely viewed as inedible. The Chavos Das will tell you no. Based on these heterim, there's two different things going on. Sometimes a food product can cease to be food. It turns into dirt if inherently it goes bad. It rots. Something bad happens to it.
Okay, then I'm just eating dirt, and that's totally fine. Whereas if the trafe ingredient is not actually bad, but mixed into when you with it became a lot of other nasty things, so then the Chavos Das thinks that trafe is still trafe. That's not dirt. That's trafe that happens to be that has so many other bitter, disgusting things in it. And then if you were to eat that pill, that would be an abnormal form of eating non-kosher food. But it is non-kosher food. It's not dirt, right? Because it inherently did not go bad. So the Chavos Das thinks the heter of eating in an abnormal way, which by the way I forgot to mention, is only, it's pater aval aser. It's another one of those. It's something which I'm not allowed to do rabbinically. So the Chavos Das says, if the chametz ingredient, let's say, in your pill is not inherently bad, it didn't go bad on its own, it's just that all the other medicinal things that are in there make this a horrible tasting pill, so there's still chametz in there. You'll be eating it abnormally, so it would only be an isur derabanan. But it's forbidden. It's an isur derabanan. You can't do that. So if you take this approach, then everything we've been saying until now kind of falls apart, right? Everything we've been saying assumes that this item is disgusting, not good, that you should treat it as a whole, as something which is inedible. But now the Chavos Das says, no, there's non-kosher food that's mixed in with other not bad tasting things, and therefore it's going to be a problem. That is where most of these chumros are going to be coming from, in terms of the halacha. That's where Rabbi Blumenkrant's book comes in. That's where a number of other products come in. Rav Moshe Feinstein, he, now we get into the more fun makaros, he applies this specifically to denatured alcohol, or specifically ethanol. Ethanol is something that you'll find in certain mouthwashes and a lot of other products. It's especially if you put it in your mouth, it can be a problem according to Rav Moshe. And the reason why is he thinks that this ethanol, it's true, there's a lot of other stuff in here that doesn't taste good, and it should be viewed by most as being in its entirety inedible. But Rav Moshe thinks the alcohol is an edible chametz product that's mixed in with a number of other bad tasting things. And because of that, he's going to be concerned, but particularly in Rav Moshe's case, because alcohol can still be separated from, let's say, the mouthwash that it comes from. And you actually have this. The truth is, alcohol is not hard to make. Right? How come people go out and they buy expensive bottles of alcohol? Let's say somebody that's really, they can't afford it, but they really love alcohol. How come they're still going to, in general, buy something that we would consider spirits, something at LCBO, and not, let's say, I don't know, a bottle of Listerine? There's alcohol in Listerine too. It's a good cheap high, no? So the truth is, alcohol's in there too, and really you could get, theoretically speaking, just as much of a high, a buzz from that alcohol. But the government makes sure that any time alcohol is used in a non-alcoholic beverage product, they say, if you want to use this stuff, we're going to give you an alcohol tax, unless you make it denatured. What that means is, unless you make it denatured. So let's describe what that is. Denaturing alcohol means that you take the alcohol that you use for this product, you add all kinds of, I should describe distillation first, before I get into what denaturing is. Distillation would be that I can heat up, let's say, theoretically, my Listerine, to a point where the alcohol steams out. If I have some kind of a dropper, some enclosed thing that'll catch it all, I can refine all the alcohol out of that, and then I would be able to drink it. Right? The government doesn't want you doing that. That's a dangerous thing. So what do? They make all products that are not alcoholic beverages, actually, they make you denature the alcohol in it. What that means is you add all kinds of other somewhat caustic, nauseating, bad-tasting, perhaps even poisonous substances, that when you, that if a person was to try to distill the Listerine now in addition to all the alcohol that melts out, also all these bad things as well, and therefore it's not worth your while to drink it, and it's not something you're going to do. That's what gets them out of the tax, and that's what makes it a bad idea, in particular, to try to get this alcohol out of, let's say, a mouthwash. That being the case, some people, unfortunately, are very much addicted to these things, and they actually do it. I have a source here from the Straight Dope. It's a great website to, various questions that you're always wondering the answer to, that he answers. So, can you get drunk on Listerine? How about vanilla extract?
So he says many mouthwashes contain alcohol. Original formula Listerine is 26.9% alcohol, making it approximately 54 proof. Other flavors contain less. Denatured makes it sound like they take out of alcohol whatever's normally in it that gets you drunk. That's not true. But in fact, all they do is put other stuff in to make it undrinkable, except by the truly desperate, in some cases poisonous. Why denature, you ask? Because the potable natural version is subject to federal excise tax, whereas the denatured kind isn't. Completely denatured alcohol is virtually impossible to render into a drinkable beverage. It may contain kerosene, among other things. Specially denatured alcohol, such as that used in Listerine, receives less radical treatment. Why would that be? Because Listerine is something you actually put into your mouth. We're not going to put poison into that alcohol. Right? What we're going to... We have more source sheets, by the way. Sorry. Should have given it to you earlier. So when you're dealing with products that actually get put into people's mouths, the way they're going to denature this alcohol is in a less dangerous way. It's going to make you not feel good, but it's not going to be poisonous. So, especially denatured alcohol, such as that used in Listerine, receives less radical treatment, although some SDA formulas do contain methyl wood alcohol, which if ingested often or copiously enough, can cause blindness, organ damage, and death. Listerine presumably is free of such toxins, which is not to say it's entirely safe, a matter we'll return to, though its manufacturer, Pfizer, decided to decline to confirm exactly what form of SDA it does contain. Why would that be? They don't want people to turn this into alcohol. They don't want anybody to have more information about how to distill it. However, my resourceful consultant, Bibliophage, deduces that Pfizer uses SDA formula 38B, as defined in the Code of Federal Regulations, since said formula is the only one listed that may include eucalyptol, methanol, methyl salicylate, and thymol, all of which are named as active ingredients on the Listerine label. Impress your buddies in the dumpster with that. Okay. Which brings up another issue. Why would anyone drink this stuff when a couple bucks will get you a bottle of Thunderbird or Wild Irish Rose and let you vaporize brain cells in style? The only remotely plausible explanations I've heard are that A, and these are things that come up, while the clerks keep a close eye on the booze aisle, boosting Listerine is, comparatively speaking, cake. You can get away with stealing it. B, some states restrict alcohol sales on Sundays or at other specified times, so if you need to get it now, so that's how you'll get it. And C, mouthwash is easier to sneak into the shelter, hospital, etc. This is where it comes up, I think, most often. You have alcoholic halfway houses, places like that. They have rules. You can't bring in these products. And the reason why is because they're worried, even when the alcohol is denatured, somebody's still going to try to get a buzz. Yeah, it's going to give them a stomach ache, it's going to do something very bad to them, but to them it's worth it because they're addicted to it. So evidence on the last point comes to us from the Journal of Emergency Medicine, which tells us of a 55-year-old woman treated in the ER for acute alcohol intoxication. Puzzled that her blood ethanol level remained high, medical personnel established that when searched, she'd been allowed to keep a bottle of Listerine on the grounds that it was a personal hygiene product. This she had been surreptitiously imbibing. ER medics have a term for the alcohol contained in such unorthodox inebriants, NBE, or non-beverage ethanol. Besides mouthwash, NBE sources include hairspray, cosmetics, some cough and cold remedies, for example NyQuil, aftershave, and other personal care products, and yes, vanilla extract. So all in all, Ramosh is coming from a very sensible place. He says, listen, and I think his language is, there are some nachrim that are crazy and they do these things, that they distill alcohol from these products even when it's not safe. And because of that, what's the case? The Chavos Das, again, what is he going to tell me? This is chametz alcohol, potentially. It's important to know that not every alcohol used in a mouthwash is derived from chametz, but many are. And if that's the case, it's true there's a lot of other disgusting stuff. Your average person wouldn't down this, right? But somebody who's an alcoholic will either down the whole bottle to their danger, or attempt to distill it, which is less to their danger but also dangerous. And because people will extract it, Rav Moshe says, I'm going to view this as chametz that is not viewed as inedible. It's chametz that's edible, contained among many other inedible products. Since these are things that can be drawn out, right? These are separable, and it's very easy to, right? Because of that, I'm going to tell you that certain kinds of liquid alcohol that can be distilled, I'm going to have a problem with that being in certain cosmetics on Pesach. Right? Certainly if you're going to put it in your mouth, and perhaps even if that's not the case. So that's where most of the, I think the mainstream kashrus organizations, the ones that don't go as intense as, let's say, a Rav Blumenkrantz, they still forbid certain things. It's coming from this perspective. It's coming from this Rav Moshe. And there's
around just alcohol.
Liquid alcohol is where you have this issue. Yeah. So the CRC gives you a list of various alcohols that could be a problem. And we don't need to do that inside. It's a lot of fancy terms that I probably can't pronounce. But that's the list to look at. If you wanted to eyeball something
that's a liquid, and you want to keep an eye on the ingredients and see, does it have an alcohol that I have a concern about, or does it not? So this is a list of things that you would look at. There's another number of other chumras that Rabbi Blumenkrantz also takes. If I could just reference him real quick. He also mentions perhaps even extending this Chavos Das even more than denatured alcohol. Right? What we mentioned earlier, the Chavos Das says you shouldn't view it as one big inedible mass, but that there's edible chametz that has a lot of other inedible products in it. So Rav Moshe invoked that idea when you're dealing with chametz that can be extracted and easily so, and that it's done. Some would say, Rav Blumenkrantz among them, is that no, I'm going to do that even for products where it's not easily extractable, and therefore I have a much broader list. Therefore, even let's say a cream, which is much harder to, if not, it certainly meets the standard that Rav Moshe is no longer concerned. But to draw that stuff out would be much harder, if not impossible. But Blumenkrantz still says, but what is it? It's an oatmeal, it's a something, it's a chametz, it's, has a lot of other non-kosher things inside of it as well. It's not non-kosher, a lot of disgusting things inside of it, but it's still chametz. So that's a problem. And there's a couple of other chumros also. There's also some that say that if it's not fit for dog consumption, right, we mentioned that as making it like dirt. Some opinions say that that's only if you're dealing with a product that's meant for eating, and then it got inedible, even to the extent of a dog. But if you're dealing with a product that, let's say, is never meant for consumption, the fact that it's inedible to a dog means nothing to me. It's still a problem. That's not how we paskin, I think, in mainstream, because like we saw earlier, the case of the ink, right? That's a clear proof against this. Shulchan Aruch paskins that the ink is fine. So it's taking that perspective that we view this whole as one big mixture. If as a whole it's inedible, it's inedible. I don't care about the fact that there was chametz in the list of ingredients. But just to have an idea of where these chumras are coming from. I think most kashrus organizations are worried about, like Rav Moshe's perspective. Less so the various other chumras that Rav Blumenkrantz brings up. But again, where he's coming from, like we said, chametz is considered a very serious isser. It's going to be the kind of isser that it might be more sensical to introduce a lot of chumras to. And that's where he's coming from. Some would say that it's already excessive, but at least now we know that it's grounded in sources. It's not craziness. And again, I would just point out, his book is not incredibly excessive, which many people make it out to be. He gives you a way of checking on your own. This is a non-exclusive list of things that are okay. He then tells you, if it's not on the list, take a look at the ingredients, see does it have various problematic ingredients in it. If not, it's good to go. So that's Cosmetics on Pesach. Thank you very much for coming.